With high expectations, Cartoon Network ventures forth and begins airing Toonami. The animation-centric station gains great ratings and seizes the opportunity to push more shows about excitement and justice. The year is Anno Domini 2000, Gundam Wing. In a move to expand the boundaries of the channel's action animation block, ambitious programming heads scheme to bring new and unseen anime to Western audiences, one of which would become the network's star and pave the way for one of Japan's most revered franchises. What is it to be human? What does it mean to be a good person? Humanity has struggled to answer these questions as it swayed between displays of utmost compassion and unmitigated savagery. We have long danced the endless waltz between war and peace, and while there will forever be conversations about the necessities and justifications of battle, we must concede, as all Gundam series do, that war is hell. What Gundam Wing did was take the tried and true anti-war message at the heart of the Gundam franchise and more deeply explore, albeit in a bit of a pretentious and verbose way, the plight of soldiers, the nobility of those we send into battle, and the deeper value of their sacrifices. Background. Shin Kidosenki Gundam Wing, or New Mobile Report Gundam Wing, is a production of Sunrise, the guys behind such anime as Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo, and Ronin Warriors. But more relevant to this video, Sunrise, under parent company Bandai, has been the steward of the Gundam franchise for over 4 decades. Gundam Wing was the second show to take place in an alternate reality from the mainstream Gundam series, with the first alternate reality being Mobile Fighter G Gundam, which aired the previous year. Whereas the majority of Gundam series and movies take place in the Universal Century, established by the original Mobile Suit Gundam, Gundam Wing takes place in the After Colony timeline. Without the constraints and baggage of the Universal Century, this standalone series was free to take artistic liberties with narrative and, more prominently, the designs of the titular mobile suits. Gundam Wing and its predecessor G Gundam took the bold step of dipping a toe, or in G Gundam's case, diving headfirst into the super robot genre, which the Gundam franchise had traditionally eschewed. Combining popular elements from previous Gundam series, like the transformable mobile suits from Z Gundam, and the Super Sentai-esque 5-member team concept from G Gundam, Gundam Wing was warmly received, if not overwhelmingly successful in Japan. But the jackpot came in the year 2000, when Gundam Wing debuted to an American audience, finally ready to experience a more expansive taste of what anime had to offer. With Cartoon Network's Toonami entering its 3rd year, Toonami founders Jason DeMarco and Sean Akins leveraged the success and popularity of Toonami staples Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon to acquire new and unseen anime for their viewers. DeMarco, having long been intrigued by the robot franchise, finally had the opportunity and authority to expose Western audiences to the legendary Gundam meta series. But which Gundam entry from the brand's long history to choose? While I can't find any statements dealing with this specific issue, I think we can deduce why Gundam Wing was the perfect choice. Toonami was looking for a full series which could run new episodes daily for months before repeats became necessary. This eliminates movies like Char's Counterattack, or OVA miniseries like Gundam 0083, Stardust Memory. Of the remaining full series in the Gundam franchise made by the year 2000, DeMarco and Akins realized there was a problem with most of them. While each season of the Gundam series is a new story with new characters and mechs, the majority of Gundam projects were part of the main Universal Century timeline, with a connected history and lore. Sure, you can appreciate Zeta Gundam for the tragic war story it is, without having watched Mobile Suit Gundam, but you're gonna be super confused why Quattro and Amuro keep shouting each other's names and staring longingly into each other's eyes, without the context to understand their relationship. The shared world of the Universal Century presented too much a risk of alienating new viewers and harming Toonami's ratings at such a critical time. This left the 3 standalone alternate timeline series, and the OG Mobile Suit Gundam, which, as the progenitor of the Universal Century timeline, had no prerequisite lore to appreciate. The problem with Mobile Suit Gundam is, it was made in the 70s, and, well, looks like it was made in the 70s. While Mobile Suit Gundam was a trailblazer for its time as a more serious war story which essentially created the real robot genre, it's very dated. It would have been a fun novelty, but would it hold the attention and imagination of Toonami's key demographic? Maybe, but it would be a gamble. Of the remaining alternate universe series, they were products of the mid-90s, so had modern animation techniques and interesting mobile suit designs. But Gundam X had proved so unpopular in Japan, it was cut from a full 49-episode season to 39 episodes. So using it as the first Gundam series to air in America? Probably not a good idea. As for G Gundam, while I adore G Gundam, and while the show would eventually air on Toonami to positive reception, it's a very weird show. Oh, and also the, ethnic stereotypes? So many ethnic stereotypes. That leaves us with Gundam Wing, a fairly serious and action-packed war story. While Gundam Wing is certainly filled with a lot of quirky elements, they're played pretty straight. The show takes itself seriously, and oftentimes, perhaps too seriously. From Bandai's perspective, Gundam Wing was an excellent choice to test international appreciation for their flagship mecha series. While it met all of the above criteria, Gundam Wing also had massive merchandising potential. Gundam Wing has a huge variety of mobile suits in addition to the 5 signature Gundams. There are Mook suits, powerful antagonist suits, the mid-season Gundam upgrades, and of course, the iconic reimagined Gundam designs of Gundam Wing, Endless Waltz. Gundam Wing was the perfect 49-episode toy commercial for the then largely unknown hobby of gunpla. Thus, with a confluence of profit motives and passion for anime, Gundam Wing was selected as the first Gundam to premiere on Toonami, and it changed everything. Honorable losers. In a bit of self-aware branding, a manga adaptation of the show, which integrates all the lore and aesthetic changes made after the initial run of the series, was created. Shin Kirosenki Gundam Wing Endless Waltz Haisha Tachi no Eiko, or New Mobile Report Gundam Wing Endless Waltz The Glory of Losers. Yeah, it's a mouthful. The part we want to keep in mind is that while the titular losers refers to the Gundam pilots in particular, I think it also broadly applies to all soldiers. That sentiment may sound incendiary due to the linguistics at play, but it's a sentiment I believe to be anti-war, but also one which, while not necessarily pro-military, advocates for the men and women we send into battle. The term Haisha means one who has been defeated or vanquished, the losers of conflict. This is a pattern we see throughout the series. While the Gundam pilots themselves are aces who accomplish their missions more often than not, these victories are cases of winning battles while losing wars. As the greater political landscape of the after-colony timeline continually shifts around them, the pilots often find themselves on their back foot, attaching themselves to factions or causes, only to find themselves again on the losing side of history. While Gundam Wing may not be part of the mainline Universal Century timeline, it's a true spiritual successor which tackles many of the same issues of power, corruption, loss, and humanity's capacity for both cruelty and for great nobility in the midst of conflict. The After Colony timeline has many one-to-one analogs to the original Mobile Suit Gundam. Humanity has moved beyond the confines of the Earth and constructed large colonies throughout the solar system. A terse peace exists between the colonies and the Earth-based United Earthsphere Alliance, a NATO-esque mutual defense pact with virtual worldwide hegemony, and rules the colonies with an iron fist, using their monopoly on the weapons of war known as mobile suits. However, an underground movement within the colonies devises a plan to finally purge the corruption permeating the Earth-centric regime. With political intrigue, assassinations, and open conflict being a mainstay of the series, we see how a world of war and strife affects us. That the cruelty, which is seemingly inseparable from human nature, touches the lives of all. However, these tragedies and sacrifices need not be in vain. Enter Operation Meteor. In response to the assassination of charismatic colonist politician Hiro Yui, a man who promoted pacifism and was an advocate for eventual colonial independence, rebellious colony citizens plan a retaliatory attack. Deploying 5 specialized and high-performance mobile suits called Gundams, they wage a guerrilla war against the Alliance, and, more specifically, their Special Forces cadre, known as the Organization of the Zodiac, or Oz for short. Oz is a shadowy presence within the Alliance, which has been manipulating politics within the Earth sphere. A boy with the codename Hiro Yui, in honor of the martyred colony leader, pilots the titular Wing Gundam. Duo Maxwell pilots the stealth-based Gundam Death Scythe. The walking weapons platform Gundam Heavy Arms is piloted by Troa Barton. For the record, Katra Rababa Winner pilots the robust and durable Gundam Sandrock, and Wu-Fei Chang pilots the high-mobility Gundam Shenlong. But as is pointed out by many characters throughout the show, the highly skilled and brutally effective Gundam pilots are nothing more than children.
A boy. The Gundam pilot is nothing more than a little boy.
Gundam has long created characters whose ages do not realistically fit their rank or station, and this holds true in Gundam Wing, with the Gundam pilots being a mere 15 years old. Operation Meteor soon goes sideways as the pilots are manipulated, resulting in Oz and their parent organization, the Romefeller Foundation, becoming the openly dominant political body within the Earth's sphere, something the Gundam pilots were explicitly trying to prevent. With Oz then attempting to forge a peace between the Earth and her colonies, the pilots become exiles to their respective homelands when the colonies themselves denounce the 5 freedom fighters. As more and more political factions enter the fray, turmoil and war engulf the solar system. The Gundam pilots are universally treated as outlaws and enemies following Oz's ascension. They have utterly lost the war to truly free the colonies from the grip of Earth. They will continue to lose the much more important political war, which is beyond their skills and abilities. Our heroes were trained to be soldiers and weapons, not politicians. As the series draws to a close, the G-Team have to reevaluate their own existence. They decide to become soldiers for peace, to help end conflict within the Earth's sphere. History may vilify them, and this push for total peace may be a naive tilt at windmills, but it's an honorable cause worth dying for. As mentioned earlier, I think the titular losers philosophically has a broader meaning, which applies to all men and women of war. Chris Pratt's Peter Quill, in a classic moment from Marvel Studios' 2014 hit, Guardians of the Galaxy, gives a famously inept but poignant motivational speech.
I look around at us, you know what I see? Losers. I mean, like, folks who have lost stuff. And we have, man, we have, all of us. Our homes. Our families. Normal lives.
While Haisha can translate to loser, the English meaning of the word is a bit more versatile, as the ineloquent Star-Lord demonstrated. I think the thought of people who have lost something encapsulates part of what Gundam Wing is trying to convey. War has a cost, but nowhere is that cost more acutely felt than by those on the front lines. The people who are willing to sacrifice for an honorable cause. If there is one recurring theme in not only Gundam Wing, but the entire Gundam meta-series, it's the recurring notion of loss. Loss of peace. Loss of safety. Loss of life. Loss of love. Loss of humanity. But loss can be the trigger for change, and hopefully the impetus for growth, wisdom, and eventually, true peace. Conflict and loss. As with all the child protagonists throughout the franchise, the age of our pilots seems to be an echo of World War II experiences, when Japanese youths as young as 17 were sent to certain death in the name of honor and country, and fits the meta-series' overarching message of the horrors of war. Unlike the tragic kamikaze conscripts from Imperial Japan, given relatively quick training in only the skills necessary to perform a singular but deadly duty, the 5 Gundam pilots of this show were well trained in the art of war and equipped with cutting-edge weaponry to improve their chances of survival. But despite being high-value military assets, make no mistake that the Gundams and their pilots were ultimately expendable. And the pilots were very aware of that. Thus, we see the first loss as a byproduct of war. Innocence. War, by necessity, strips those sent to fight of the innocence from the realities of life. Most prominently, the human capacity for cruelty. The child soldiers of Gundam Wing are very much pilots of unparalleled skill, helming weapons of mass destruction, and the detached or amused demeanor with which they take enemy lives shows these boys have lost something very precious. This mid-battle joking and banter can also be hand-waved as a result of creating an entertaining show, or perhaps even truth in television, as a macabre sense of humor is something which develops in many people with professions dealing with life and death. But there's something off-putting when you keep in mind the ages of the pilots as you watch the series. Not to say the pilots are without conscience. Throughout the series, we see that the Gundam pilots are good and honorable people trying to do their duty. They don't kill without reason. They are soldiers fighting for a cause in which they believe. But the ease with which they end life and accept their own deaths is disturbing. It's also important to remember the obscene odds the young pilots were facing, and it becomes clear that Operation Meteor was, if not a one-off kamikaze attack, still very much a one-way mission for our protagonists. The pilots were viewed as effective but disposable weapons in the colonial retaliation against the Alliance and Oz. 5 young men were to stand against the combined military might of the entirety of Earth, and it was only through the sheer skill of the pilots, the technical superiority of the Gundams, chance allies, unpredictable political maneuvering, and some of the thickest plot armor I've ever seen, that the series protagonists weren't cornered and killed. Heck, by the end of episode 10, Hiro has tried to take his own life no less than 4 times. The nobility of sacrifice. Gundam Wing is legendary amongst the Gundam franchise for intellectual-sounding philosophizing about war and peace. While I think there's certainly more depth to how Gundam Wing discusses its themes, it still fundamentally boils down to war being a terrible blight which humanity continually brings upon itself. What Gundam Wing does a little more specifically is focus attention on the heart and sacrifices of professional soldiers. In Akira Kurosawa's 1954 classic, Seven Samurai, the ragtag titular Seven Samurai are hired to defend a poor farming village against a large cadre of armed bandits. At the end of the movie, the bandits have been defeated thanks to the efforts of the samurai, with 4 of the warriors paying for the victory with their lives. As the film draws to a close, Kanbei Shimada, the fearless and wise leader of the hired samurai, looks out on the farmers who resume their normal lives in the fields. The camera returns to Kanbei and the other 2 remaining samurai, standing before the graves of their fallen comrades. Kanbei then says, much to their confusion, he goes on to clarify, war requires sacrifice from soldiers in some form, with the ultimate cost being life. Those who reap the rewards of victory to its fullest are the people whom the brave men and women of war died to protect. The people who can move forward unburdened by the weight of loss and the scars of battle. Civilians who can go on with the innocence and hope which have been torn away from men of war. While soldiers must bear the horror of combat and the loss of friends. All Gundam has played a delicate balancing game between being ardently anti-war without casting blanket condemnation on the soldiers who wage it. The balance has been achieved by showing a variety of people serving in the military. We are exposed to good and honorable men aligned with the opposition, and treacherous villains amongst the heroes. We are shown artists, scholars, caring and empathetic mentors, or mild-mannered everymen who, due to the afflicted times in which they live, must put aside a peaceful life to fight for a noble cause. Gundam Wing tells us, if we are going to require our brothers and sisters to make the ultimate sacrifice in our names, that we, for whom they fight, should remember and honor them for
the most noble fate a man can endure is to place his own mortal body between his loved home and the war's desolation.
The biggest champion of the common foot soldier is on and off antagonist, Colonel Treize Kushranada, top-ranking official of Oz, and the mysterious Romefeller Foundation. Treize is the vessel through which a lot of the philosophical elements of the show are conveyed, as well as the puppet master manipulating things from behind the scenes. Treize's goals are hinted at throughout the early parts of the series, but his ideology finally becomes clear as the various antagonist factions introduce a new and frightening tool of war, the mobile doll system. The mobile doll system is what we call today drone technology. Mobile suits equipped and controlled remotely, with reaction times and fighting ability far better than a human pilot. Treize is ardently against the use of mobile dolls, and considers them so morally repugnant that he exiles himself from the Romefeller Foundation in protest. How can someone who claims to champion the cause of soldiers look at technology which removes our military men and women from danger as bad? Despite his being a main instigator of conflict throughout the series, and being more than willing to send men to certain death, Treize deeply yearns to see humanity move beyond the need for war. But, as a warrior scholar himself, he recognizes how, in war, we see the inner nobility of men rise. Valorous deeds, a spirit de corps, and ultimately, the willingness to sacrifice yourself for the greater good. His philosophy was that, as long as war was a constant in the human condition, we need to nurture in soldiers honor and a sense of grand purpose. To hold men of war to standards of behavior which protects their inner humanity, despite duties that might be cruel and inhuman. Thus, he praised and honored the Gundam pilots, despite being their enemy, while condemning allied troops, and even his right-hand woman, Lady Un, for acting dishonorably. To Treize, it wasn't enough to win, it was to win correctly, and to fight for a noble purpose. Our history is filled with tales and songs of glorious deeds done in war. But what glory can mindless drones achieve? If war must be, then let it at least highlight the nobility and inner strength of mankind. Treize's opposition to the mobile doll system goes to his broader pacifistic hopes. Treize realized a certain political reality within the concept of war in the modern age, and was first seen in the midst of the Vietnam War. Vietnam was the first televised war. The American people were exposed to the horrors of the battlefield in real time. Americans watched as their fathers, brothers, sons, and friends returned in flag-draped coffins. Optics and public sentiment are supremely important for any ruling class when conducting war, and this factor was what Treize was relying on to herald in a true age of peace for humanity. Treize's ultimate goal was to cause a final war so devastating it touched the lives of all, so we could finally see eternal war could only end with the utter destruction of our civilization. To Treize, the loss of good men was a noble sacrifice to finally bring about a new age of enlightenment. It's a surprisingly insightful and pragmatic standpoint. Mankind has always waged war, and we refuse to evolve our thinking except through harsh and tragic experience. Treize understood that we could not, without lesson, purge ourselves of our barbarism. Thus, his abject rejection of the mobile doll system becomes clear. When you remove humans as an element of war, do we feel any sense of loss? Is there truly sacrifice? When war can be conducted from the safety of a bunker, it becomes a game for politicians and merchants of death, and more likely to happen. Thus, the ultimate nobility of the sacrifice we ask of men of war is that the holes in our hearts that their deaths leave may be for the betterment of humanity. Aura of dramatic nobility. The Gundam franchise has a long track record of varying, but in general, quality art direction. Keep in mind, the Gundam franchise has been running consistently for 4 decades, so art which may look dated or odd by today's standards was not out of the norm for the day. One can't help but call Mobile Suit Gundam's art primitive when viewed against the modern standards of the more recent Gundam series. But after almost 30 years since first airing, Gundam Wing holds up pretty well, and is a testament to the quality of the series. Of course, as with any animated series, there are some janky, inconsistent, or downright badly drawn shots or frames. But when Gundam Wing is at its best, it's a truly beautiful thing to behold. We must, of course, start by looking at the titular mobile suits. Gundam Wing's mech design team consisted of veteran Gundam designers Junya Ishigaki, Hajime Katoki, and the legendary Kunio Okawara, the man who designed the original RX-78 Gundam. I'm a big fan of Mook suits, those suits which may not have been the heroes of the actual story, but were the unsung heroes by providing enemy suits to fight against, and disposable allied suits to give a sense of stakes. After rewatching this series for the first time since I was a kid, and having seen quite a bit of other Gundam series since the days of my youth, I can say that Gundam Wing's Mook suits are among the best from the franchise's history, and they fit the stylistic tone and meaning Gundam Wing was trying to impart. A lot of the enemy mobile suits, both preceding and following Wing, were derivatives or homages to Zeon's iconic Zaku from Mobile Suit Gundam. What the Zaku and its descendants convey was a sense of menace. They show the enemy as a malevolent entity against which the protagonists justifiably struggle. This was used well narratively in Z Gundam to show the growing corruption of the Federation, as they began using mobile weapons resembling Zeonic suits. The enemy suits from Wing feel very robust and utilitarian. Their design is very simple, with an understandable and traceable lineage, with small design elements carrying over across newly developed suits, and all deriving from this universe's super prototype, the Tall Geese. I think it goes to show how Gundam Wing tries to portray soldiers. All the enemy suits, especially the first 2 mass-produced suits seen, the Leo and Ares, have a utilitarian and functional dignity. For example, Zeonic suits from Mobile Suit Gundam's 1-Year War introduced the red mono-eye design with the Zaku. The rotating mono-eye is creepy and inhuman, which, to be fair, would be a great form of psychological warfare. Alliance and Oz mobile suits from Gundam Wing also have a mono-eye camera, but it imparted less a sense of intimidation and more a faceless uniformity. It created an impression of a common foot soldier. They may be a mass-produced and generic enemy horribly outclassed by the superior Gundams, but they fought and died for what they believed in. They died with honor and deserve respect. An interesting thing to note is how the Leo and Ares suits from the first third of the series differ from the Taurus and Virgo suits from the latter parts of the show. While most of the mobile suits on the show are characteristically bipedal and humanoid shaped, the Leo and Ares seem more human compared to the alien-feeling Taurus and Virgo. Fittingly, the ground-based Leo looks like an infantry soldier, with its most common color scheme being a sort of drab camouflage green. In fact, the face camera screen protector flips up when the mobile suit is in use, making the entire head assembly resemble the field caps used by Imperial Japanese soldiers. As for the air superiority suit Ares, Their head harkens to that of fighter pilots' helmets and masks. But as the show introduces the concept of the mobile doll system, the mobile suits, designed specifically to be mobile dolls, look less human. The Taurus has a bunch of appendages or flaps around its body, as well as an elongated head, which was to accommodate its transformation into flight mode. But the overall aesthetic gives it a sort of spiky, inhuman look. The final grunt suit introduced was the Virgo, which was clearly based on the Leo, but with disproportionate shoulders, which again causes it to seem more of a mindless brute than the dignified boots-on-the-ground Leo. These design progressions from Leo to Virgo reflected how the aristocratic Rockefeller Foundation was a degenerate organization which trivialized war. War was literally becoming less human as Rockefeller consolidated power over the Earth's sphere. Bereft of human decisions and human capacity for honor and mercy, war would be little more than a game for the social, political, and economic elite. Or more so than it already was. But then we get the Gundams. In contrast to the generic suits of the series' enemy factions, each of the Gundams are unique and stylized. Speaking at Otakon in August 2017, Gundam Wing's executive producer Hideyuki Tomioka discussed how corporate mandates resulted in Wing's first 5 Gundams.
The purpose of Gundam was to sell merch, specifically the plastic models. So we were told that you have to make a TV series that has 5 Gundams in it. The first one has to transform and fly, the second one has an extending arm, the third one's gotta shoot lots of things out of its chest, the other 2 will leave up to you. So that's what we got.
Similar to its G Gundam predecessor from the year before, the 5 protagonist mobile suits are more flamboyant and less practical than one would consider from a franchise which pioneered the real robot genre. But I don't think anyone can deny they're really cool looking. There are 9 Gundams shown throughout the show, not counting the OVA redesigns, which have become perhaps more iconic than the series' originals. Each of them is unique and memorable with a special feature. While we must always acknowledge the capitalistic intent behind the design of any Gundam series, I think the 5 Gundams and their sense of individuality fits the plotline and themes of the series pretty well. Whereas Rockefeller, and by extension Oz, creates mass-produced war machines in order to bring the world under their hegemonic and uniform control, the Gundams, as a repudiation of that control, are a declaration of colonial independence, and therefore have distinct and independent personalities. While the Gundams are able to operate independently as vectors for guerrilla combat, each of the Gundams also has a niche specialty fitting a certain military philosophy, which makes them extremely effective when united. As a kid, it was hard for me not to be drawn to the sheer awesomeness of the mobile suits. However, rewatching the series as an adult, I couldn't help but admire the character designs which, aside from some weird times like this, look pretty good. The first thing that you'll notice in general, but about the 5 Gundam pilots more specifically, is they're really pretty. It's kind of a meme nowadays that Gundam Wing's pilots are a boy band in space. Random pictures of the boys in trendy clothes are rife around the internet. And that's not even including Zex, whose name rhymes with the sensual cravings he stirs. Like the Gundams they pilot, our heroes have a unique look about them, which makes them quickly distinguishable, whether it be their hairstyles, or often strange sense of fashion. The Gundam pilots feel like they have their own spirit and character. Unlike the regulated military forces of the Alliance, or Oz, which wear pristine military uniforms reminiscent of Napoleonic-era military dress, the Gundam pilots wear whatever clothing they feel comfortable into combat. These kids may be super soldiers piloting bleeding-edge technology, but they're still supposed to be rebels without resources or the need for the facade of nobility demanded by Rockefeller. Hero wears his trademark green tank top with black biking shorts. He is a soldier who doesn't care about aesthetics as long as he achieves his mission. His clothes allow for freedom of movement. It also shows a certain simplicity. It implies a sort of sad asceticism. Hero has nothing beyond the fight. He has no burdens, but he also has no attachments. He has no ulterior motives. He has no guile. He will tell you to your face that he's going to try and kill you. Although, if he does, you have good odds of surviving the series. Duo has his long ponytail with his black clothes and priest collar. While the reason he wears the clothing of the clergy is explained in expanded lore, here it matches his philosophy as justice from space, divine wrath from above. Fittingly, Duo uses the moniker of God of Death, but his long ponytail matches with his devil-may-care personality. Contrary to his Gundam specialty in stealth, Duo is bright and friendly. He makes friends easily and is exceptionally loyal. Troa is similar to Hero in that he's the strong and silent type. His hair is the strangest in the series, unless you count Trace and Dorothy's eyebrows. My god, they're glorious. His bangs are swept to the right and are extremely long, often obscuring the right side of his face. This matches his mysterious personality. There's something more to his heart that we're just not seeing. He also wears a mask when in his cover identity as a circus performer, reinforcing that there's more to him than we're allowed to see. That we never really get to know who or what Trowa is. As a fun note, his Gundam also has the same mask. Like, he spent the money to have a mobile suit-sized version of his circus mask made for his Gundam. For reasons? In terms of clothing, Trowa is the most fashionable and put together. Trowa dresses rather sharply with a turtleneck tucked into white slacks. Trowa's lack of eclectic dress again means he's able to blend in easily. Fittingly, Trowa is the spy of the group, able to infiltrate the enemy ranks. Catra too is well put together. He wears a nice collared button-up dress shirt with well-pressed khaki slacks. It hints at good upbringing, which is later validated by showing he is a son of a wealthy family. Catra is kind and polite, as his dress would imply. Wu Fei's dress most closely resembles Hiro and is similarly single-minded. But whereas Hiro might define himself as a soldier, Wu Fei would probably call himself a warrior. He wears a blue tank top with white martial arts pants. He's also kind of a That's not reflected in how he dresses, but it's something that needs to be said. Overall, the artwork and art style is well done. More often than not, the animation has a consistent feel and quality fitting a Gundam series. But there are times when shots are drawn in such a way as to highlight the focus on drama. This is often shown with lens flares, low-angled still shots, and dramatic color tones. The creators themselves admit that they were trying to create a drama rather than just another Gundam war story, and you really feel it in these moments. As for the music of the series, it runs the gamut of genres from electric guitar to get you worked up, to softer woodwind tracks to accentuate the dramatic elements of the show. It's weird to say, but the ambiance of it all feels so much more adult-oriented than what we might expect from a series based around giant robots. The backing tracks could instill romantic yearning, a bittersweet sadness, or a bit of elegant nobility to fit the themes and tone the series creators wanted. But how could I discuss the music of Gundam Wing and not mention two of the first J-pop songs many American kids were ever exposed to, Just Communication and Rhythm Emotion. Both these tracks were the product of J-pop duo 2mix. J-pop has a sort of characteristic vibe and sound depending on the decade, with vocals done by Minami Takayama and synth player Shina Nagano. These songs kind of purely embody 90s Japan. There's this driving momentum to these tracks, which preps you for the exciting drama you're about to witness. Both Just Communication and Rhythm Emotion share themes of showing your passion and reaching out to the person you hold dear. Now, love songs in Gundam are nothing new by any means, but Just Communication and Rhythm Emotion have a bit of thematic connection to all the pilots, but very much in regards to Hiro and Relina, our series' female lead. Hiro is a super soldier who has given so much to the cause. He has lost his childhood, but is a deeply sensitive boy. Just Communication and Rhythm Emotion's lyrics call for Hiro to reveal his true self, the kind boy he had to bury to become a soldier, to reach out and reveal himself to others, and more specifically to Relina. More broadly, if we run under the themes of peace, it can only be done with understanding. How man must reach out to one another to forge understanding and cooperation, which Just Communication and Rhythm Emotion call for the listener to do. Reach out with your heart and make a connection. Probably more importantly, they're super catchy earworms that have been stuck in my head for over 2 decades. And that they're paired with these beautiful intro sequences and animations really makes for a great experience. Dramatic story without stakes. In a bold move by the creative staff, Gundam Wing took a long-running franchise known for being giant robot war epics and decided to focus more on the human drama. This isn't to say that the previous Gundam series weren't prone to their own bouts of interpersonal melodrama, or that Gundam Wing lacks spectacular mobile suit action, but upon rewatch, I realized how much of the series focused on the human characters. The show is rife with interpersonal conflict, political intrigue, and establishing of different relationship dynamics. While the mobile suit battles are a huge focus of the show, I was shocked at how little mobile suit action there was relative to the focus on human elements. The benefit of these one-off seasons taking place in alternate realities is that it allows the showrunners a bit of leeway to experiment with the Gundam formula. Over the years, the mainline UC Gundam series did a lot of world building, especially in regards to the technology of the future. We saw a logical and meaningful progression in mobile suit technology, which would then be discussed in the show. Things like why mobile suits would be necessary or practical, in-universe budget considerations which affect mobile suit development, and any number of other things that sci-fi fans love to think about. Gundam Wing didn't really care about any of that. The mechanics and logistics of mobile suit warfare were always secondary to the needs of the story, or because they look really cool. There was always an endless supply of enemy cannon fodder for the Gundam pilots to battle. The Gundam pilots were always fully armed, fueled, and ready to blow stuff up. Sure, there were scenes showing the pilots purchasing supplies for the Gundams, but with new eyes, I see how these scenes actually flesh out the narrative of Gundam Wing. This scene, with Wu Fei negotiating for supplies, builds his character as savvy and able to navigate the black market, reinforcing that our pilots aren't the traditionally naive kids like Universal Century Gundam pilots. This scene, where Duo is haggling for equipment for his own mobile suit, demonstrated that there was still support in the colonies for the Gundam pilots and their cause. Gundam Wing rarely discussed the technological underpinnings of the mobile suits. We are told that the Gundams were technologically advanced compared to the mass-produced suits of the time, and super durable due to being made of Gundanium alloy. Aside from that, it was all kept pretty vague, because at the end of the day, how fantastical technology works is secondary to the effect the technology has on the world and the people who inhabit it. That said, this doesn't mean that Gundam Wing is a masterpiece of dramatic storytelling. It tended to veer more into the realm of cliché soap opera than a deep study of the human condition, despite their efforts to be the latter. Our main protagonist's name is literally Hero. Our female lead, who champions the cause for total pacifism, is named Relina Peacecraft. They weren't exactly subtle, were they? Troa, at one point, survives being inside an exploding mobile suit. He floats unconscious through space, only to be found by the circus he worked with on Earth, who happened to be in space at the time. Oh, and he has amnesia. That's peak soap opera. And that's also perhaps my biggest issue with Gundam Wing. It is kind of pretentious in cliché. Gundam Wing is filled with a lot of pseudo-philosophical soliloquies about the hearts of men, the nature of war, and the practical obstacles to pacifism. And those are absolutely cool and interesting topics to discuss. But the problem is that these are very complex issues with which humanity has been struggling for ages. And it's not going to be a 49-episode Gundam series which solves them. It doesn't really put forward a strong opinion of its own. At the end, Gundam Wing kind of settles on, war is bad, peace is good. And that's fine. It's par for the course for a Gundam series. But it's certainly underwhelming considering the plethora of ethical and philosophical issues it introduced. Gundam Wing also kind of undermines one of its core themes, that the glorious sacrifice of soldiers should be honored. It does this in two ways that are two sides of a single coin. The 5 pilots and their Gundams are so absurdly superior to mobile suit pilots from the Alliance or Oz that entire bases of troops can be wiped out by a single Gundam. We don't see enemy soldiers fighting a valiant struggle against our protagonists, but a quick and sometimes truly meaningless death, as they have neither the skill or equipment to effectively counter the Gundams, unless the plot demands it. But we'll get to that. The show tried to rectify this problem in the final few episodes of the series. Our resident spokesman for the noble foot soldier, Treize Kushranada, during an old-fashioned mobile suit duel with Wu Fei, admits that he knows the exact number of people who have died by his orders and has engraved all of their names into his memory. He has to tell us how their deaths were ultimately for the higher cause of eventually bringing about a truly peaceful world. Most were unwitting sacrifices, such as the great Field Marshal Noventa, whose assassination was masterminded by Treize himself, or General Septim, who Lady Un, Treize's gal Friday, personally gave one of the most metal deaths in the history of television. But we rarely see the grunt deaths as tragic or even much more than trivial. The Gundam pilots deal with them as quickly and mindlessly as killing pests. The other side of the coin is that it's hard to appreciate the nobility of sacrifice when none of your protagonists have to make the ultimate sacrifice. As a kid, I got really wrapped up in the action, the aesthetic, and the momentum of the series that I never realized the Gundam pilots are only occasionally in danger, and that's usually when faced against an enemy with equally strong plot armor. It's really strange. The Gundams will be immune to damage until they're not. Beam weapons will bounce off them unless it disintegrates a Gundam. It's very inconsistent. Gundam Wing overall has a low body count for named characters. Of course, Duke Dermail, the head of Romefeller, and Khans, the head of White Fang, had to die as the leaders of enemy factions. Treize, being the magnificent bastard with good intentions, but still technically a main antagonist, also goes out in a blaze of glory. The 5 scientists who built the Gundams are seemingly killed, but later found alive in subsequent works. Most shockingly is the last-minute heel turn by Zex, who sacrifices himself to destroy a giant space fortress on a collision course with Earth. He prevents an Earthside genocide that he himself ordered maybe a few hours before. And while his being engulfed by a huge explosion was shocking, it gets almost immediately undermined by Lucrezia Noin, Zex's soulmate, saying that she knows he's still alive. A hunch which would then be proved true in the sequel OVA Endless Waltz. The remaining named characters, including the Gundam pilots themselves, all alive. This includes the Magonak Corps, a quirky bunch of Middle Eastern militiamen who were Katra's companions as well as comic relief characters. These guys, they scream expendable red shirt characters. They're honorable, funny, good warriors, and get just enough screen time for us to get attached. These guys make it out alive. This is all surprising, given the Gundam franchise's time-honored tradition of killing off auxiliary and sometimes main characters in order to demonstrate that no one is safe in war. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of killing off characters purely for shock value, but if a core theme of your show, and indeed your overall franchise, is that the lives of men are a precious commodity, but their deaths are sometimes necessary, then the storymakers failed to truly embed that message in the hearts and minds of viewers. A product of a more innocent time. There's a bit of an elephant in the room when it comes to Gundam Wing, which I think shows it as a product of its time, and I must admit, something I never really thought about as a kid. I think that had any delays occurred with Toonami obtaining the rights to the show, or if Toonami had decided to wait a bit before airing the series, Gundam Wing could have failed spectacularly. That elephant is September 11th. While the Gundam pilots are soldiers, and we grow attached to them as our protagonists, we need to remember that they're very much terrorists. The pilots were deployed to Earth to attack, sabotage, and generally cause as much chaos as they can to the Alliance and Oz. They launch surprise attacks, blow up the barracks of sleeping soldiers, crash planes into ships, and Troa even tries to suicide bomb an Oz facility. But it's never framed in this way because the adage holds true that one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. And while it's certainly an interesting perspective to explore, Gundam Wing never really delved into issues of radicalization or brainwashing that leads youths to be willing to fight desperate battles. And it feels like a bit of a wasted opportunity, since guerrilla soldiers have always had to scrap and fight day to day with limited supplies, surviving by their own wits and belief in the justness of their own cause. The actual nobility of that cause and the honorability of their tactics aside, there is a sense of reverence for these people who give up a comfortable life not only to be soldiers, but also as standalone agents deep in enemy territory. As mentioned, aside from some emotional angst, the pilots of the series don't really suffer all too much during their almost year-long war, except for Hiro, and that's because he self-detonates his own Gundam while he's standing on it. Don't worry, he gets better. They never have to scrap to survive, and that undermines that core theme of the nobility of sacrifice. Last impression. Sacrifice and loss are an inevitable part of life, and while not all sacrifices are equal, the cost of war touches all. Whether it be our daily comforts, feeling of safety and security, to the loss of friends and family. And while Gundam Wing has a message of honoring people who give their lives for noble purpose, at the end of the day, it comes off muddy and unclear. I'm torn on this series. Rewatching the show for this video was interesting because I hadn't watched Gundam Wing in its entirety since I was a kid. I came to appreciate things I dismissed or straight up didn't notice as a child, while also being more apathetic to things which captivated me during my youth. As an adult, I was surprisingly more interested in the interpersonal and political drama over the mobile suit action. If I had one word to describe Gundam Wing, it would be inconsistent. As a fun one-off anime action series, it's not bad. It's exciting, with some great, if over-the-top, battles. The suit designs are iconic, with merchandise from this series still being produced to this day. If you're taking Gundam Wing as a piece of entertainment, clearly it succeeded, as it spun off a plethora of audio dramas, sequel, and prequel manga, as well as the legendary OVA Endless Waltz. Gundam Wing captured the imagination of a generation of kids in the West, and, along with legendary shows like Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, and Pokémon, blazed a trail, allowing for mainstream acceptance of anime in America. But where Gundam Wing fails is in its own attempt to be an intellectual and philosophical work. What it tried to do was admirable, but it had neither the time nor capability to do more than introduce interesting concepts about war and peace, let alone try and solve these issues, or even offer its own unique standpoint beyond the classic war bad. And that's perhaps Gundam Wing's greatest misstep. It tries to do too much, not only with the themes and philosophies it tries to discuss, but even in terms of its main narrative. Gundam Wing feels like a mishmash of the Universal Century, with the character of Zex Marquise being the ultimate Char Aznable XP, as he speedruns Char's entire Universal Century arc, from skilled masked adversary with his own secret agenda, to a freedom fighter on the side of the protagonist who eventually fakes his own death, to trying to drop a giant space object onto Earth in hopes of forcing mass migration to space. They crammed 10 years of Char's growth and journey into 49 episodes, and it made Zex seem like a bit of a disloyal asshole with unclear motives. He only gets a pass because Zex is really f***ing dreamy. It's just too much, too fast. And that sums up Gundam Wing. Gundam Wing is seen as a middling series by the Gundam community, and I see why. Since watching Gundam Wing as a kid, I have watched a bunch of other, and frankly, better Gundam works. Things like Gundam 0080, Char's Counterattack, or even Gundam Wing's OVA sequel Endless Waltz just resonate better. 0080 because it actually shows the sacrifices of war, and how sometimes those sacrifices are tragically for naught. Char's Counterattack because it had a breadth of scale, which Gundam Wing tried to copy. Endless Waltz because its production values and art design were nothing short of iconic. Endless Waltz also embraced what I think Gundam Wing tried denying it really was at heart: a mecha-based fairy tale.